Most IELTS students follow writing tips that sound helpful, but are actually secretly hurting them. And that's why they're stuck at band 6 or 6.5. Band 7, 8, and 9 students, they follow different tips. I know this for a fact because I've analyzed hundreds of real student interviews, and then I asked Notebook LM to find exactly which tips they talked about and rank them from most helpful to least helpful. So join me as I rank every popular writing tip from most helpful to ones that will kill your score. So without further ado, let's jump into it. So here's all the different tiers. S tier is absolutely essential. These were the most common things that the students said. These are non-negotiable. You have to use these in your writing to get a band 7, 8, or 9. A tier, these are major score boosters. A lot of students talked about this. These are very, very helpful. If you use these, it will improve your score. B tier, helpful, but only helpful in certain circumstances and not helpful for every student. And F tier, if you use these tips, it will likely lower your score. And let's throw in band 0. These are the tips that could actually get you a band 0, which many people don't even realize exists, but it does. Okay, so let's take the first tip, which is get AI or ChatGPT to help you with IELTS, specifically give you feedback on your writing. So where does this rank? So being able to use AI, if it can give feedback effectively and accurately, it would be massive. It would be great because people would be able to get unlimited feedback at basically zero cost. So a lot of the AI software costs like $20 a month or something like that. Not a huge cost considering the amount of feedback that you could get from it. So it is very promising, but is it S tier, A tier, F tier? What is it? What I'll do is I will tell you at the end where AI comes, but I want you to think through the other tips and think about why AI might not be ready yet to give you great feedback on your writing. Think about all the other tips. So let's move on to the next tip, which is get expert feedback from an ex-examiner. Where does this rank? Well, almost every single person who got a band 7, 8, or 9 mentioned this.
The biggest game changer for me was the detailed feedback, because when you take the IELTS exam, you can never know about your mistakes, where you went wrong, especially if your English is good.
So that should indicate that it is A or S tier. Which one would it be? I'm not sure which one because a lot of people can't use this option because they say it's too expensive. So maybe it's A tier because it is very, very effective, but it's not S tier because not many people can access it. However, if you don't use it, it's going to end up costing you much more because you're probably going to fail your test. The other thing that the students said was they were stuck at 6 or 6.5. They did the test over and over again, which cost them like close to $1,000 for most students. That was about the average that they spent on failed tests. So it is S tier because it costs you a little bit in the beginning, but it saves you a huge amount over time. Okay, so next one is using high level or fancy vocabulary. Where does this feature? Well, this was actually the most common one that students said led to poor results.
They told me that high-end vocabulary is really important and you should use some difficult words.
Your idea should be very impressive and complicated. Use complex words, complex vocabularies to get your score, even more. But I saw that it never worked.
What they discovered was this actually led to more errors, and you will be penalized for making lots and lots of errors if you're using vocabulary and grammar that you don't really understand. And what a lot of students said was it was much better to use a simpler word that they knew was correct than to use a complex word or a complex phrase that they weren't sure about. On our VIP course, we call this the 100% rule. Only use words you're 100% sure about using. So this is F tier. Okay, next one is definitely S tier. This is the one that nearly everybody said helped them improve their writing score, and it's free. Anybody can do it, so it's definitely S tier, and it is planning.
It is very important to plan ahead of the essay.
I spend around 5 to 7 minutes in planning my essay.
Spending 5 to 10 minutes planning your essay, doing all your thinking and your planning before writing. A lot of people don't like doing that because they think that it wastes a lot of time. It actually saves you a bunch of time because you're not going to get lost. You do all your thinking first and then you can just start writing. So planning and thinking about your ideas and putting them into a structure, kind of a skeleton structure before you start writing is absolutely S tier. If you don't know which structures to use, what I'll do is I'll put it all into an ebook for you, all the different structures that we give our VIP students. I'll put those and you can get them a link in the description. Okay, here's a controversial one, brainstorming. Brainstorming ideas before you start writing. This is one of the most commonly taught tips. If you look at any IELTS textbook or most IELTS YouTube videos or go into any IELTS classroom around the world, how to generate ideas, they normally teach brainstorming. The thing that a lot of students talked about was how they felt when they were brainstorming. They talked about being confused, worried, stressed, and it didn't actually lead to them thinking of good ideas. In fact, it led to them thinking of way too many ideas that were irrelevant, and it led to them wasting a lot of time, which is the exact opposite to what you should be doing during the writing test.
It doesn't really work. The brainstorm, you waste a lot of time of the exam and you only have a few minutes to do that.
You should be spending as little time as possible on each part of the test, being very efficient with your time, and when thinking of ideas, only generating relevant ideas. So brainstorming, according to our band 7, 8, and 9 students, is F tier. If you're unsure about what to do instead of brainstorming, instead of thinking about 5 ideas, think about what's the one simplest idea. Or another way to think about it would be, what's the most common idea or the most popular idea? If I asked 100 people, what popular idea would be at the top of the list? That is a much faster, more effective way of thinking of ideas rather than brainstorming. Okay, next is one that many of you may have heard of, you may have not. I came up with it many, many years ago when I was teaching in the classroom, and it's something called the coffee shop method. So what I found was when students were talking to me before class, they were able to always think of very good ideas. But as soon as I put a question in front of them, it kind of went into something I call test mode, and they froze up and they started to think of very high level, complicated academic style ideas for their essays that were difficult to think of, difficult to write about, and it just led to them running out of time or coming up with ideas that led to a complete mess of an essay. So I came up with a method called the coffee shop method. All it is look at the question, imagine you are talking to a friend or a colleague over coffee about this topic. What would you say to them? It kind of takes you out of the test and removes a lot of the stress.
I imagine my best friend and we were in Starbucks and she asked me, do you agree that people that live in a urban zone, blah, 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 have a healthier life? Immediately I came up with 2 main ideas for the essay and I wrote it down and I started doing the essay and I thought in that moment, wow, this was really, it wasn't hard at all as I pictured it before.
So is it S tier? I wouldn't say it's S tier because some students find it difficult to imagine themselves in a coffee shop. Other students, they find that very easy and very natural, but it is highly effective. So I'm going to put it into A tier, not S tier because it doesn't work for every single student. So the next one is very controversial because a lot of teachers teach this, a lot of students believe this, a lot of students use this, and it is the never repeat a word rule, that if you repeat a word in your essay, you will automatically lose marks for vocabulary. So every single word in your essay needs to be unique. If you follow the never repeat a word rule, what happens is 2 things. Number 1, you waste a huge amount of time thinking, how can I change this word? Or number 2, you change it to something that's wrong. So a lot of our students talked about changing words from, for example, agriculture to horticulture. That they are synonyms, but they are not close synonyms. They don't mean the same thing. So it wastes a huge amount of time, it leads to more mistakes, and it causes a lot of stress.
I was trying to not repeat words, and at one point I got stuck in one word because I was searching for the synonym.
And all this took up so much of time when I was doing my IELTS exam.
So I think it is better to use the same word if you don't know another synonym rather than using some difficult words that don't go with your task, which ultimately lowers your band score.
So this is definitely F tier. Basically anything that makes your life more difficult on test day, causes more stress, and leads to lower scores, definitely F tier. Because I would teach something that caused maybe a little bit of stress, was difficult to do if it actually improved scores. But I would never teach something that lowered scores and caused stress. That's cruel. Okay, so another very, very common thing that came up was leaving time at the end to proofread. The average amount of time our students mentioned was 3 to 5 minutes. So we talked about planning. Most of them are planning for 5 to 10 minutes, and then they are checking, they're proofreading their work at the end for about 3 to 5 minutes. That leaves about, let's say, for example, 25 minutes. So if you planned for 10 minutes, checked at the end for 5 minutes, that would leave you 25 minutes during the writing stage to write out your essay. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but if you plan out everything in that 10 minutes, all you're doing is just taking your plan and writing it out sentence by sentence. And I don't want to talk about specific number of sentences in each essay because it will differ from essay to essay, but let's say, for example, you have 12 sentences in an essay. That's more than 2 minutes per sentence. And if you're aiming for band 7, 8, or 9, you're not really ready to get a band 7, 8, or 9 if you can't write one sentence in 2 minutes. It's not that difficult for someone at that level. So is this A tier or S tier, leaving time at the end to proofread? I wouldn't say it's S tier because some students just don't have time. They're not good at time management. And if you tell them you must proofread at the end, they can kind of rush through the essay trying to get there, and they're thinking more about time management than they are just about writing a clear essay. But if you can practice this and you can get that 10 minutes planning, 25 minutes writing, and 5 minutes at the end for checking, you will dramatically improve your score. Because think about grammar, for example. For your score for grammar, it is very much dependent on how many mistakes, how many grammatical errors you are making. If you have 5 minutes at the end, you can go in and say, oh, it's just a silly punctuation mistake. I can go in there and fix that, or a grammar mistake in there. If you just fix even 3, 4, 5 of those silly mistakes at the end, that can be the difference between 6.5 and 7.
I got plenty of time to proofread. I found few mistakes, I corrected them. So I was 110% sure that I'll be clearing my IELTS in this attempt.
It's not S tier because it doesn't work for everybody, but it definitely is A tier. Okay, practice under exam conditions. So what this tip is suggesting is you must, for example, writing task 2, or if you're doing task 1 and task 2 at the same time, you do it under timed conditions. So you don't have any help and you must stick to the clock. A tier, B tier, S tier, F tier. Well, I would say that this is B tier because we need to adapt it a little bit. So if you tell a student, just go and practice under exam conditions, that's kind of like telling someone who's learning to drive a car to take the car out onto the highway and drive it 100 kilometers an hour on day 1, their first lesson. That would be crazy. You shouldn't do that with writing either. You shouldn't try and, for example, task 2, you shouldn't try and get it done in 40 minutes on your first go. The way that we suggest students should use this is the first time that you are practicing, have all your notes, have a dictionary, have all the help that you need, and take 3 hours to write an essay if you need to, because all you're doing there is kind of learning the system, learning the structures, thinking deeply about the process of writing an essay. You're not trying to be at kind of match speed. And then the next time You do it in 2.5 hours, then 2 hours, then an hour and a half, and then an hour, and then 50 minutes. And you're just trying to increase speed each time because you're not thinking as much.
Yes, I think that's very important. Otherwise, there's no way of keeping a track of whether you're on the right path or you're just random. So that basically helped me, I think, to go slow at first and then jump to the exam conditions.
So right before your test, you should be able to look at the question and without really thinking, write out your essay in 35, 40 minutes. Contrast that with you're just learning how to write an essay. You're constantly thinking about the structure and the ideas and the grammar and the vocabulary and everything, but you need to use that time for learning, and then we get quicker and quicker as we go through. So I'm going to put that in B tier. It's where you want to get to, but it's not where you want to start. Okay, next tip is use lots of linking words. So linking words are sometimes called cohesive devices. Words like therefore, however, in conclusion, for example, and for instance. One of the biggest differences between a band 9 essay and a band 6 essay is in a band 9 essay, you don't notice the cohesive devices, you don't notice the linking words at all. I could go over there and grab any book off the shelf, any well-written book, and open it up, look at the whole page, do this at home if you want. You will find very few cohesive devices, very few linking words, even in academic textbooks. But if you look at a band 6 IELTS essay, it's full of them. And this is just a misinterpretation by many people of how the test is actually marked.
I used like lots of linking words because I thought that will increase my score. So you'd find a lot of furthermore as a result and these things. But I realized that these things were actually lowering my score instead of increasing it.
More linking words doesn't equal a higher score because you're not just being judged on are they accurate, it's are they appropriate? So if, for example, you're writing an example, it's fine to put, for example, for instance, because it's appropriate to do that in that circumstance. But it's very inappropriate to start every sentence with a cohesive device or a linking word. So this is actually F tier because using them too much is a clear sign that this person is not at a band 7, 8, or 9 level. But it also means that many people will not just overuse them, but use them inaccurately because there's too much going on in your head. We want to minimize the amount of thinking time. And I've seen videos where there's like, here's 17 ways to write in conclusion. Like they are out there. Like there are infographics I've seen of like, here are 7 different ways of saying therefore. Like how many conclusions, how many examples are you actually writing in a 250 word essay? You're writing one conclusion, learn one simple way to write in conclusion or to conclude or whatever it is. So this is F tier because it leads to errors, it lowers scores, and it leads to overthinking and it leads to more stress than is really required. Next one is my favorite. It's the thing that my students and my team hear again and again and again. It's kind of my motto for life. You probably guessed it, which is keep it simple. Another way of saying it is clarity is king. It doesn't mean just use simple language. It doesn't mean try and make each sentence as simple as possible. It means that most students have been taught or believe that to get a high score, your ideas need to be complicated or high level, your structures, the overall essay structure needs to be complex, the grammar you use needs to be complicated, and the vocabulary needs to be high level. As we have already talked about, that leads to stress, leads to mistakes. But let's take the ideas one, for example. You don't get any extra marks for high level ideas. We work with a lot of engineers, doctors, people like that, very intelligent people who their whole lives have been dealing with very complex topics, stuff that would go way over my head. But then they bring that into the IELTS test and they spend a lot of time trying to think of very complicated ideas, and then they spend way too much time trying to think of how can I explain this in a complicated way, thinking of high-level examples, and then they're trying to insert lots of high-level vocabulary. This is why many very intelligent people fail the test. So what we do, first thing we do with those people is, what's the simplest idea? All right, not the most complex. can you explain that idea to a 10-year-old in very simple terms? Use language that you understand. Not the simplest language possible, but the language that you're confident using. And for a lot of those people, those very intelligent people, professionals, we can normally fix their writing in days, not weeks, not months, because there was nothing wrong with their vocabulary, their grammar, their writing ability.
When you keep your ideas simple, your train of thought get aligned. You just have to keep your head clear, think simple, and when you try to think simple, the answer just comes along.
So keep it simple is S tier. What I would say that. I came up with it. So the next one is all about reading and listening. I know that this is a writing tips video. We might do a reading and listening one. If you want us to do one, let us know in the comments. But what we encourage people to do to become better writers is to read and listen to very specific things. So a lot of people say that I don't know anything about the topics. I don't know anything about the questions. So if you look at the most common task 2 question topics, there are things like education, health, the environment. If you go to any good newspaper online, like the BBC, for example, and look at the topics, they are on things like the environment, health, education. And if someone is struggling with idea generation, for example, we would say just read that every day. Read 2 or 3 stories. Note down the ideas that they use, note down how they develop those ideas, what kind of vocabulary are they using. This is excellent for improving your vocabulary over time, or listening to podcasts on that topic.
After reading newspapers, it became very easy for me to write down the examples. So I didn't have to think about the examples at the time of writing. Apart from this, it also benefited me in speaking portion to answer all these part 3 questions.
So I wouldn't say that this is S tier, because this is more a long-term strategy. This could take months, but it is extremely effective, not just for ideas, but also for vocabulary, as I said, and also for grammar. It's also good for if you're listening, for speaking as well. So it's an amazing tip, but it is a little bit too long-term for S tier, so I'm going to put it into A tier. Okay, 2 more to go, and then we'll talk about AI. So the next one is memorizing templates or cheat sheets and cheating the test in that way. A lot of students love this. Does it actually work? So first of all, let's talk about the difference between using structures. Memorizing a structure and memorizing a template are very, very different. Memorizing a structure is just showing you which types of things you want to include in each paragraph. So I'll link again to the description. I'll put all of the structures that we give our VIP students, the people who made this list. I'll put those in the description for you. You can have a look at those and see what those are. This is very, very different from templates. Templates are where it's kind of a pre-written essay and they just take the ideas out of it, and all you have to do is just memorize that template, and then you can pop in your ideas and magically you're going to get the score that you need. It sounds too good to be true, and when things sound too good to be true, they normally are. This is band 0. This is 0 tier, because examiners are trained to spot this, and it's very easy to spot this. And the better the template is, the more popular the template is, the more examiners see it. They're looking at this all day long, and think about the reason why students are attracted to this, because it shortcuts their way to writing a good essay. Why do you need a shortcut? You need a shortcut because you don't know how to write in English. If you don't know how to write in English and you're doing a writing test in English, what is the best solution? The best solution is to learn how to write in English.
Don't memorize, don't fall into the trap.
Templates do not help you do that. Structures do, but templates don't. So this is the worst tip of all. Okay, so second last, then we'll get on to AI, which is practice makes perfect. Just do lots of practice tests. Which tier would we put this in? So this is one of the ones that you'll hear a lot. It sounds sensible. It sounds true. Like the more you practice something, the better you become at it. In general, that is true. The more you write, the better writer you'll become. The more you read, the better reading you'll become. Maybe I need to practice my speaking. But the story I always tell about this is I had 2 friends growing up. One friend let's call him George. George lived on a farm, massive farm, and his dad had an old car, and he let George drive the car from he was like 9-10 years old. So here where we live, you can do your driving test when you're 17. And George went and did his driving test at the same time as my other friend, let's call her Sarah. Sarah had never been in a car her whole life until like 3 months before her test. She got a driving instructor. George didn't. And George was driving by the time he was 17 for like thousands of hours. And Sarah had 10 hours of lessons, but with a driving instructor, constantly giving her feedback, constantly telling her, this is what to do, this is what not to do. Who do you think passed and who do you think failed? George, with all that experience, all that practice, failed continuously. I think he failed 5 times. Sarah passed first time. So just doing lots of practice, it can actually make you worse.
I was following practice makes perfect kind of thing. So I was just doing that, and instead of correcting my mistakes, I was just practicing again and again.
Don't just practice again and again and again and again and expect to magically improve. It would be much better to practice for 5 hours with someone giving you feedback than it would be 500 hours reinforcing the same errors again and again. Because it's really, really easy for an examiner or an ex-examiner or a really good teacher to look at your essay and immediately tell you, here are the two or three things that you need to fix in order to improve from a band 6 to a band 7 or a band 7 to a band 8. It's literally our jobs. It's all we do. But you won't know that because you're not an expert. So this is actually F tier. And this brings us on to AI. Is AI good at giving feedback? Well, as you can see, more of the tips were F tier than they were kind of A tier, S tier. Most of the tips were wrong, or a lot of the tips were wrong. You're not AI experts. I'm not an AI expert, but I have spent around $100,000 or more on consultants to try to get AI to grade IELTS writing effectively, and none of them were able to do it. Why is that? Well, there's 2 main reasons. The first reason is AI has been trained on all the information out there about IELTS writing. The guys at OpenAI and Anthropic and Google are not picking the best tips and only showing the AI the best tips. They're showing all the tips. Most IELTS advice online, as we have seen, actually lowers scores, or a lot of it lowers scores. So you're not getting an expert teacher in AI, you're getting a very average teacher. Some of the things they'll tell you are true, some of the things they will tell you are wrong. That brings us on to the second problem. The second problem is it is generative AI. It is not evaluative AI. It has not been trained to evaluate things. It has been trained to generate a response that keeps the user happy. It is like training a fish to climb a tree. It hasn't been trained to do that. It's not what it's for. But what it is for, what it is a genius at, the best in the world at, is telling people things that they will believe that might not be true.
ChatGPT kept saying that, you're getting there. You need this, you need this, you need to do this better.
So you as a student looking at the advice from AI is like, my God, this is amazing. Me as an expert, I can look at it and within 3 seconds say, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. So it is amazing at giving general advice that is kind of correct. It is terrible at giving accurate advice. So AI giving you feedback, including companies telling you that they have cracked the code and they have done it, is F tier. It's just not that good. It will be in the future, but not right now. Right now, you can't beat HI, human intelligence, is much better than AI. And if you don't believe me and you think AI is great, here's a video where I did a speaking test with AI, and you might be surprised on the results that it gave me. So check that out.